So we're going to take a very introductory look at InDesign and look at a little bit of the way it behaves and getting used to some of its tools and interface. So this is the icon you're looking for, or something similar to this depending on which version you have. So you should start with some sort of splash screen like this. I'm just going to choose document for right now. We can talk about some of the other types later on. Once again, I'm not going to worry about this too much right now. There is one thing I want to mention. I do want to put in a certain number of pages. I'm going to go ahead and put in 4 pages. And I think facing pages sounds fine, and we're going to keep the portrait. The rest I'm not worried about. Okay, so here we have our opening. And now I put 4 pages, and so the very first thing you might be wondering is where the other pages, or are they all here? And so right now we're looking at just one page. We're looking at just the opening page. If we click here on pages, you can see here page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. So this software is primarily used to lay out like books, magazines, newspapers, stuff like that. And if you look at a book, or if you open a book, you start with a page on the right side. Now you might be saying, well, about the inside cover? Well, that's the cover, and if you want to talk about that, well, then you could look at the cover itself, and once again you start on the right side, or at least in Western culture you do. So this is that right-hand side. So you have a bunch of tools over here on the left side. As we've seen in other programs, you have a black selection arrow, and then you have the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow, and they behave similarly as they do in others. You have a few other things in here that we're not going to worry too much about right now. Type tool, line tool, pen tool, pencil tool, rectangle frame, rectangle tool. So you've got quite a few things in here. So if we start out with the type tool, we use this to create blocks of type. And as I move this around, you can see that it is showing me guidelines based on where certain parts are, like the middle of the page on the vertical or the middle on the page on the horizontal. And so we can use those too. Now we can type directly into InDesign if we want to. However, it's generally recommended not to. It's normally recommended to have your text written in some other application, and then when you're ready to bring it over into InDesign. And that's because InDesign isn't really thought of as a word processing program. It's thought of as a page layout software. And not only that, but if we don't currently have the text we're looking for, we can even right click, and we can tell it that we want it to fill with placeholder text, which is going to be sort of a form of lorem ipsum or something similar. Now, one of the things that can frustrate people sometimes is when you've got a block of text, and let's say you have 2 of them. I'm just going to copy and paste those so they're the same size. When you've got blocks of text and you add in, let's just put in some filler text. And we'll put in some more filler text. What if we have to add in some new content in here? So we have to press return a few times and add in a whole new chunk of text, right? So what happens then? So down at the bottom, we lost a bunch of text, and that text did not move up to the top. And that does bother some people. It's not that InDesign can't, it's just that we haven't told it to. So to fix that, we just click this little red plus there, and we can click this text box to link it, and now the 2 are linked. So now if I add gaps in here, you can see the text on the right moves as well. There's a bunch of other stuff with text too that we can talk about. If you go up into the top, into your menu options, you have stuff like check spelling, dynamic spelling, some stuff like that. We can go into the fonts in here, which font we're using, what the weight of that font is, as well as the size and the leading between the lines. We can also adjust the tracking, which is a little hard to tell when I'm zoomed out, but if I zoom in, you can see a lot better. Adjusting tracking, or let's see, where's a letter that needs to be kerned a little bit. Well, there's several on here, but that one bothers me a little bit more than the other. Something like that. And it can be more obvious in other fonts. And we can stretch the font if we want to, which we should never do. And we can stretch it vertically as well if we want. So just things that you should never do to a font, you can do if you want to, but you shouldn't. If you don't have the italicized version of a font, you can try to do it manually yourself, which you shouldn't. You can increase the height of individual letters or of whole words. And you can play with font color and font outline color if you want. And there's more you can do with it, but that's a decent start. Now what you can also do is you can also add in shapes, and you can color them the way that you want. And they have gradients down here that you can try to play with if you want, but we'll talk more about them later. Now if you want to add in a picture, which you probably should at some point, as blocks of text alone are kind of boring, what we typically do is we typically add in a frame. Let's make this the same size as our text, and let's drag in this into that. So dragging it directly in, it became rather huge because it's at the full size. Now it's going to look a little not great because to make things load smoother, InDesign creates low quality thumbnails that it then uses. So that way it's not having to load all these really large graphics, helps it move a little bit smoother and a little bit easier. If we want to shrink this to fit the size of the box, we can play with some of these options. And you can see we still have a bunch of extra. The reason why it works this way is this allows us to move our contents around, essentially cropping the image without having to continually go back into Photoshop or some other application and constantly making these changes. We can just adjust it the way that we need to right here in the software itself. Takes a little while to get used to, but once you are used to it, it is a great tool. And I'm going to just duplicate this layer just to get some of this text, and I'm just going to overlay it on top. And I don't really want this box to be that huge, so I'm going to tell it to fit this box to that text, and that's much better. Now there's still a little extra in here because I have this line break there, so I can delete that. And that will be even better. There we go. I often have people ask me how to change the background color of a page, and there might be a better way officially, but the fastest way is just to grab your shape tool, make it the size of your page, give it a color, and send it to the back. And let's go ahead and actually use the gradient on that to give this a fade. I wanted to go the other direction actually. Oh, that's a little angled, so let's try holding shift. There we go, so it locks in sort of the 90 or 45 degree angles, and that's a bit better. So nothing amazing, but not too bad for just a quick rundown. Now we also have this pen tool in here, and you can draw with this as well if you want to. It's alright for real quick things that you might want to add in, but if you want to do a lot of extensive work, it's still typically better to work in Illustrator and then add your art into it from there. but you can use these for some nice effects depending on what you want to do. And you can also use it to write on a line.